Hello there, how are ya? Welcome to another video of Star Trek Opinions, where I, Alan Telford, give you my varied and various opinions of Star Trek, for better or for worse. And today, we're going to be talking about asking the question, is Star Trek any good? And the simple answer is, yes. Yes it is. But, at the same time, no it's not. It can at least sometimes be rather terrible. What do I mean by that? Well, let's start with the Star Trek movies. Basically, everyone knows Star Trek movies, whether you're a fan or not a fan. And, yeah. At least when it comes to the first 10 films, well, there were 13 films in total, so far at least. And when it comes to the first 10 films, the original 6 of Captain Kirk, then the Next Generation movies, which there are 4, involving Captain Picard. With those films, there's definitely a rule of thumb going on, where the even number films, for example, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Star Trek VIII, First Contact, they are definitely the best of the best when it comes to Star Trek movies. However, the even number ones, I meant to say the odd number films, for example, Star Trek I, the motion picture, Star Trek III, Search of Spock, and definitely Star Trek V, the Final Frontier. They're considered the bad Star Trek movies. While they may not entirely be terrible and absolute shit, they're not good either. They are definitely bad movies, especially Star Trek V. And that said, in my opinion, my own personal opinion, Star Trek Insurrection, I forget if that's the 9th or 10th film. Either way, Star Trek Insurrection is definitely the worst of the worst of the worst of not only Star Trek films, but definitely the worst of the worst of the worst of all films I've ever seen, full stop. There we are. But we have people who've seen the films and have their own different opinions. For example, despite what I just said about Star Trek Insurrection, I've heard some people who actually like that film. They might have been smoking something suspicious that day, but I don't know. But either way, I'm going to respect their opinions. I could only give you my own thoughts, but what you yourself, dear viewer, think about any of the films, whether the one you're watching is actually any good or is actually any bad, is really down to your own personal opinions, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the rule is what the rule is regarding the films. As for the 3 JJ films, the 2009 one, then Into Darkness, and then Beyond, and then Star Trek Beyond, it seems to be a slight flip, in the sense that while I enjoyed all 3 films, the 2009, the first one, was actually very, very good. And then Star Trek 3, the Star Trek Beyond, was also very, very good. It was amazing. Into Darkness, however, it was still a good film, but not as good as it could have been, as it should have been. While I enjoyed Into Darkness, there were a few things, a few minor details when it came to the plot line and the story, which perhaps could have been done better, and perhaps should have been done better. But there we are. So, at least with the films, Is Star Trek any good? Yes and no. It really depends on which film you're watching and what you take away from that film afterwards. But there we are. Now, as for the TV shows, we've got 7 of them. 7 TV shows of Star Trek at the moment, all of which can be found on Netflix. For starters, we've got Star Trek the original series, which we've had 3 years of, 3 seasons. And with that, obviously, there's going to be a few good episodes and a few bad episodes. With the original series of Star Trek, there's an episode called Balance of Terror, which everyone agrees, anyone who watched that episode, they all agree that is by far one of the best episodes of the original series that was ever made. And yeah, it's definitely one of my personal favourites when it comes to the original series. Then, on the other hand, you've got the episode called Spock's Brain, which a lot of people who've seen... a lot of people seem to think that Spock's Brain is a terrible episode of the original series. Me personally, I don't mind Spock's Brain. It's an okay episode, but I can understand why a lot of people don't like it for whatever reason and think it's a bad episode. So yeah, then we move on to our next series of Star Trek, which is the animated series, the cartoon series, which there are 2 seasons of. I've not really watched that all the way through, not properly anyway, so it's hard to say which ones are good episodes or bad episodes. But at the end of the day, a lot of people seem to not like the animated series in the first place for various reasons. It's a long story. All kinds of people saying all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. Maybe I'll make a different video about that another day, but there we are. Long story short, a lot of people think that the entire thing isn't that good. So there. The next version of Star Trek is Star Trek The Next Generation, and that ran for 7 seasons, 7 years. And so, with that in mind, you can imagine there's a lot more scope for not only good episodes, but also a lot more possibility for bad episodes as well. Can't think of many examples off the top of my head right now, but the 2-part episode Best of Both Worlds is generally considered one of the best episodes, easily by far, when it comes to the early years of Star Trek The Next Generation. While on the other hand, there was one episode that I've yet to actually watch, which involves the character Dr. Crusher having sex with a space ghost. You heard me correctly. Apparently, there's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation when the character Dr. Crusher has sex with a space ghost. And when I heard about that, I was like, yep, yes indeedy, that sounds like it's going to be a terrible, terrible episode. I'm going to have to find that out and watch it at some point, but there we are. When it comes to Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one of the best episodes by far, not only for DS9, but also for Star Trek overall, full stop, is an episode called In the Pale Moonlight, which is focuses on Captain Sisko more so than anyone else. But it's a fantastic episode and definitely one of the best episodes I've ever seen. As for bad ones, I really should have checked this up, looked into it, but there are perhaps one or two bad episodes. But I guess for me, the DS9 finale, What You Leave Behind, overall that is a fantastic episode, but at the same time, for me personally, it is a bit, maybe slightly crap, because there are, if I remember correctly, there are elements in that episode in What You Leave Behind which are, to me, rubbish, because they seem rushed. They do seem a bit rushed, but there we are. But the rest of the episode I quite enjoyed quite nicely, so yeah. When it comes to Star Trek Voyager, however, as I said previously, for the most part, that ran for 7 years, and for the most part I didn't like Voyager. It's terrible from the get-go. But to be fair, there are a few good episodes in it. For example, there's an episode called Distant Origins, which is a really good episode. To be fair, I enjoyed that episode of Voyager. Now, it could have, on one hand, it could have been better than what it was, and it should have been better than what it was. But all the same, I stand by what I just said. Distant Origins is easily one of the best episodes of Voyager, as opposed to the rest of it being rubbish. As for Enterprise, same story. There are a few episodes which are good, a few episodes are bad. It's just, right now I can't think of any examples, but maybe I'll go into that another time, in another video. As for Star Trek Discovery, well, there's only been 2 seasons of that so far, and I've only actually sat down to watch the first season. And to be honest, I'm not entirely impressed with that show so far, despite it having some really good aspects about that. It's very hit and miss. So again, like with Enterprise, I'll make another video about that another time. But at the end of the day, everything I've just said are examples as to why, in my opinion, Star Trek is both good and bad, in equal measure. As for what you think, it's up to you to decide once you've actually sat down and watched whatever version of Star Trek you intend to watch that day. But in the end, however it goes, for better and for worse, I hope you enjoy watching your Star Trek, however it pans out. And those are all my thoughts about whether or not Star Trek is any good. On that note, today is Saturday, the 3rd of August 2019. I hope you enjoy your day, take care of yourselves, enjoy your weekend, be safe, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.